She parked her golf cart across my garage like it was a velvet rope blocking the entrance to a VIP club, and the only thing behind it was my busted lawnmower and a half-eaten bag of dog food. I stood there, holding 2 grocery bags and a pizza box, staring at the ridiculous little electric chariot she had wedged neatly between my trash bins and my garage door, keys removed, brake locked, like it was her personal protest monument. Meanwhile, I could hear the bass thumping from her patio next door, because of course Karen was throwing another one of her signature Sunday get-togethers. Code for martinis, shrieking, and HOA gossip thinly disguised as a charity fundraiser. I didn't even need to check the sticker slapped across her bumper. HOA chairwoman, we keep standards. Yeah, standards like parking your pastel pink golf cart on someone else's property and acting like you own the zip code. I hadn't lived here long. Just 4 months into my lease, and I was already learning the ecosystem of Maple Hollow Estate. Every neighborhood has its predators, prey, and parasites. Karen was something worse. She was a self-proclaimed pillar of the community, a retired school principal with a flair for floral capris, neighborhood control, and passive-aggressive threats delivered with a smile so tight it could pop pearls off her necklace. Our first interaction had been when I installed a smart doorbell. She'd waddled up my walkway to let me know, in that gratingly chirpy voice, that recording devices violated the community's aesthetic cohesion, even though half the houses already had ring cams. When I quoted the HOA bylaws back at her, she blinked like a robot overheating and muttered something about how not everyone here appreciates outsiders who think rules don't apply to them. Fast forward to Sunday afternoon, and I was the outsider once again. This time, with melted ice cream in one hand, a lukewarm pepperoni in the other, and a golf cart barricading my garage. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I just walked around the stupid cart, stepped over a decorative flamingo someone had thrown into my yard as a joke, and put the groceries away. Then I poured a whiskey, pulled up a lawn chair, and watched her party unfold. My lawn gave me a perfect sightline into the chaos. Red Solo cups were already littering her lawn. Someone's kid was using a sprinkler like a slip and slide. A man in a flamingo shirt was shouting about crypto near the grill. Karen herself stood on her patio with a microphone in one hand and a glittering wine glass in the other, making some long-winded announcement about bringing class back to the neighborhood. I waited until the sun dipped low, around the golden hour, the one time every house looks like a magazine cover. That's when I made my move. I strolled back out to the driveway, phone in hand, and took a few clear, time-stamped photos of the cart. I even got a bonus shot of Karen posing with her guests, the blocked garage in the background like a cherry on top. Then I called the non-emergency line, explained the situation, and waited. The tow truck arrived in 20 minutes. The driver took one look at the situation, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "Seriously?" I just pointed to the cart, the party, and the HOA parking violation signs that Karen herself had lobbied to install. "Rules are rules," I said with a shrug. He hooked the golf cart like it was a prize at a carnival. The mechanical winch made a satisfying hum as the wheels lifted off the ground. It was halfway onto the flatbed when we heard the shriek. Karen's voice cut through the air like a vulture with a megaphone. "What are you doing with my cart?" she screeched, elbowing her way through the guests. Her wine glass sloshed onto her leopard print patio rug. People turned, some whipped out phones. The crypto guy actually started filming vertically. I kept my voice cool. It was illegally blocking my garage. I followed HOA protocol and called it in. Her eyes bugged like she couldn't believe I had the gall to use her own playbook. "You could have come to me. I was hosting an event. And I was trying to get into my house," I replied, sipping my drink. Which is generally a priority over lawn karaoke. She lunged for the tow truck driver, who calmly stepped aside. "Ma'am, you can pick it up from Municipal Impound tomorrow. Bring ID, proof of ownership, and a copy of your HOA parking permissions if you've got one." "I am the HOA," she barked, as if that would cause the clouds to part and the cart to lower itself back into place. The tow truck rolled away while she stood in the street, stunned, clutching her wine glass like it might give her back control of the situation. I went inside and closed the blinds. 10 minutes later, someone pounded on my door. I ignored it. A voicemail came through from a friendly reminder, HOA number, urging me to resolve future disputes through neighborly communication rather than punitive measures. I responded with a link to Karen's bylaws, the section on vehicle obstruction highlighted. Then I turned my phone off and slept like a baby. But Karen wasn't the type to leave a score unsettled. The next morning, I found a bright yellow citation taped to my mailbox, claiming that my recycling bins were left out past collection hours. A total lie. I checked my doorbell footage. Karen herself had pulled them slightly forward at 4 a.m., just enough to be over the line. The timestamp was clear. I sent the footage to the HOA's general inbox with a polite note. Appreciate your vigilance. Also, this appears to be tampering. An hour later, I got an email from the HOA board's vice president, who I'd never met. He was a retired Navy vet named Tom with a reputation for playing by the book. His reply was 2 words, "I'll handle it." By midweek, Karen's name had mysteriously disappeared from the HOA website's leadership roster. A new notice went up on the community bulletin, pending review of board conduct. That Thursday, a motion was filed for a special HOA meeting, open to all residents, regarding abuse of authority and inappropriate enforcement behavior. The last time that happened was 3 years ago, when a board member used HOA funds to install a koi pond. He'd moved to Arizona after the vote. Karen, however, didn't move. She doubled down. I saw her inspecting every yard on the block, notebook in hand. She even measured a neighbor's lawn with a retractable tape measure and flagged his grass height. It wasn't enforcement. It was retaliation. But people notice. And when people notice, they start talking. And when they talk, well, sometimes they ask if maybe the quiet guy next door with the smart doorbell and the impeccable recycling habits might want to run for the board. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Because I knew Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. And honestly, I wanted to see just how far she'd go. The next morning, I found a plastic pink flamingo stabbed into my front lawn like a passive-aggressive war banner. It wasn't mine. I don't do lawn ornaments. But Karen, in her infinite imagination and grudge-fueled creativity, had decided to wage psychological warfare with cheap tacky symbolism. Attached to the flamingo's neck was a laminated tag that read, "Tacky is as tacky does. HOA will be watching." I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring at the thing like it might explode. Then I turned around, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the HOA handbook again. There it was. Section 4.3, Unauthorized decorative installations on another resident's property, punishable by a $100 fine. I took a photo, attached it to an email, and CC'd Tom. Less than an hour later, I heard the familiar thud of Karen's sandals stomping up the street. She came into view, hair frizzed, arms flapping like a furious pelican. She didn't even knock. Just started shouting from my walkway. "You think you're clever, don't you? Trying to turn the neighborhood against me." I sipped my coffee and leaned against the doorframe. "I think I'm just enforcing the rules you insisted everyone follow." That wasn't a citation. It was a courtesy warning. And that golf cart wasn't a vehicle, it was a tripping hazard with wheels. Funny how words stop mattering when you're the one breaking the rules. Her face turned a blotchy shade of crimson, and for a moment, I thought she might actually self-combust. Instead, she took a deep breath and composed herself. "You've been here 4 months. I've lived here 17 years. You think you can just barge in and start calling shots?" I smiled genuinely. "Nope. I think I can follow your rules better than you can." That shut her up. For a beat. Then she spun on her heel and marched off without another word. The flamingo remained, but I left it in place. Exhibit A, in case she tried anything more imaginative. Later that day, I got a call from my neighbor Claudia, the retired art teacher who lived 2 doors down and spent most of her days gardening or painting birds. She was the type of person who brought you soup when you were sick but also could eviscerate someone with a single raised eyebrow. "She just left my porch crying," Claudia said. "Said you were staging a coup. She blocked my garage. I got it towed. Everything since then is her flailing like a toddler in a tiara." Claudia chuckled. "Well, flail or not, she's losing control. You've got people talking." It wasn't a full-on movement, yet, but it was becoming clear that Karen's grip on Maple Hollow was weakening. The problem? That made her desperate. And desperation, when mixed with entitlement, turns into something toxic. The next day, a city zoning officer showed up at my door. Clipboard in hand, he said there had been a complaint about an unpermitted structure in my backyard. I led him back there, utterly confused, and he pointed at my garden shed. The same one that had been there since I moved in. The same one that was on the original property layout. He was polite but firm. "I just have to verify it's not a recent construction or in violation of setback rules." While he measured, I called the landlord. He laughed and emailed me the original permit from 2009. I handed it to the officer. Case closed. Or so I thought. 2 hours later, a fire marshal appeared. Someone had reported a suspicious smell and possible illegal fire pit usage. I don't even own a fire pit. The closest I come to fire is when I overtoast bagels. But still, he had to investigate. And wouldn't you know it? Just as he left, a bylaw officer rolled up to inspect excessive weed growth. My lawn is mowed weekly. The only weed I've got is a stubborn patch of mint in the flower bed. It was all Karen. Every call, every complaint, every desperate swing she could take at me to regain her imaginary throne. But what she didn't know, what she never even considered, was that I was documenting every single thing. Time-stamped video, emails, voicemails, and witnesses. Claudia had started taking note. The crypto guy from her party? He'd shared the video of the cart being towed with a group chat full of local residents. One of them uploaded it to the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "When HOA rules backfire." By Friday, a full-blown community storm was brewing. Someone started a poll. Should Karen step down from the HOA permanently? Anonymous voting. Over 200 responses in the first 6 hours. Over 80% said yes. But Karen? She doubled down again. Saturday morning, I woke up to find a huge canvas banner strung across my driveway. It said, "Unwelcome Behavior Zone, this resident under investigation by HOA." It was zip-tied between 2 street signs and fluttered in the breeze like some kind of exile notice from a tyrannical homeowner regime. I couldn't help but laugh. It was so dramatic, so perfectly Karen, that I almost respected the effort. Almost. I took a picture. I took several, actually. Then I did something I'd been waiting to do since the whole thing began. I printed every piece of evidence. The banner. The flamingo. The city reports. The HOA emails. The photo of her cart blocking my garage. I stapled it all together into a dossier the size of a church bulletin and slipped it into an envelope labeled, "Formal Misconduct Report, Karen H." Then I walked it 2 blocks over to Tom's house. He answered in gym shorts and a t-shirt, clearly not expecting anyone, but when I held up the envelope, he nodded like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "She's out of control," I said simply. "I know," he replied. "And the board's tired of covering for her. Then maybe it's time for a change." He took the envelope. "Be at the meeting Monday night. You'll want to hear what comes next." That weekend was strangely quiet. Karen didn't do her usual drive-bys. No more lawn measuring. No new flamingos. The banner disappeared by Sunday afternoon, possibly because the wind nearly tore it down. I could feel the tension, though. Like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for a shoe to drop. And I wasn't sure if it would land on her foot or mine. Monday night rolled around. I put on a clean shirt and walked to the community center, where the HOA held its monthly meetings. The room was fuller than I'd ever seen it. Folding chairs lined the back wall. People stood near the windows. Even the mailman showed up. Tom opened the meeting with the usual formalities. Then he paused, looked at Karen, seated in her usual front row spot, and said, "We have a special motion tonight. It concerns the conduct of a board member." He looked directly at her. Specifically, our chairwoman. Karen stiffened, but she didn't interrupt. Not yet. Tom laid out everything. The retaliatory complaint. The abuse of authority. The banner. He referenced bylaws, cited evidence. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Everyone else did. Claudia stood up and described Karen crying on her porch. The crypto guy mentioned the Facebook video. Someone from the next street over brought up a time she fined him for leaving his garage open for 15 minutes. Then Tom asked if anyone had a motion. Claudia raised her hand. I move that Karen H. be removed from her role effective immediately, pending a permanent board vote. Someone seconded it before she even finished. Then came the vote. The result wasn't even close. It started with the silence. Not the kind that brings peace or a sense of resolution, but the creepy, uneasy kind. The kind you get just before a storm rolls in or after a dog stops barking for no reason. Karen had gone silent. No more complaints. No flamingos. No walk-by inspections or garbage can measuring. And that alone should have felt like a win. She'd been voted out, stripped of her little paper crown. Her HOA reign was officially over. But I knew better than to believe it was done. People like Karen don't disappear. They reload. 2 days after the vote, I noticed her patio lights were off for the first time in forever. She was still living there, but she'd gone full cryptid. No social media posts, no charity announcements, no nosy strolls. I saw the blinds twitch once when I stepped outside to water my plant. That was the only proof I had that she was still in there, seething behind the curtains like a Bond villain waiting for her cue. That alone would have been unsettling enough, but then strange things started happening around the neighborhood, and it wasn't long before they all pointed straight back to me. First came the break-in, or more accurately the staged one. I came home from work to find my garden gate slightly open and a few flower pots knocked over. Nothing was taken. No signs of actual forced entry. Just enough chaos to raise questions. I checked the footage from my security camera, installed after her last stunt, and there it was. A blurry figure creeping into frame at 2:37 a.m., shuffling something near my fence, then ducking out of view. I couldn't prove it was her, but the silhouette had that same hunched, irritated Karen energy. I reported it just to be safe, but the officer shrugged. Could have been kids, he said. Nothing's missing, so. The next day, my mailbox was mysteriously open with my water bill sticking halfway out, soggy from the sprinklers. I always close it. Always. I double-checked the footage again. Nothing. No one. I even reviewed 3 hours of night vision video just to be sure. Whoever was messing with me had learned from last time. They were being careful now. The final straw came that Thursday morning. I went to back out of my driveway and found 4 long nails arranged directly behind my tires. Not scattered. Arranged. Perfectly aligned, heads pointing up. I stared at them for a long time, crouched like they were a trap set by someone who wanted to get caught and not caught at the same time. It was a message. The kind of message people leave when they've lost all their legitimate power and are dipping their toes into sabotage. I swept the nails into a Ziploc bag and walked them down to Tom's place. He opened the door wearing reading glasses and looked like he'd been halfway through a Sudoku. "She's back," I said, holding up the bag. He took them and nodded slowly. "We can't accuse her without proof." "I know. But this is going to escalate. She's not done." Tom rubbed his temple. "I've been hearing things. Other board members say she's been reaching out, asking if they'd consider reinstating her if she apologized publicly. And they said no. But she's not giving up. She wasn't just trying to punish me anymore, She was trying to lay the groundwork for a comeback. And like any good schemer, she knew how to shift the battlefield. If she couldn't win the fight on HOA rules, she'd turn to gossip, reputation, social manipulation. The following week, Claudia invited me to her backyard for what she called an informal neighborhood chat. I figured it would be tea, garden talk, maybe a little Karen war story swapping. What I walked into was more like a tribunal. 4 other neighbors were there, families I barely knew, looking unsure, concerned, polite in that overly cautious suburban way. Claudia opened with a tight smile. Some people have expressed concerns about the ongoing situation. Translation: Karen had been whispering. One of the neighbors, a guy named Greg who ran a landscaping business, cleared his throat. Look, man, we're not saying we don't believe you. But Karen told a few people she saw you shouting at a city inspector. Said you threatened him and claimed the HOA would bury the paperwork. I blinked. What? I handed him a permit from my landlord and offered him iced tea. She also said you might have, doctored footage of her cart being towed. Claimed it was part of a smear campaign. I laughed genuinely. Karen drives a golf cart the color of bubblegum and parked it directly in front of my garage. I didn't need to doctor anything, she did the work for me. Greg held up a hand. I believe you. I do. But she's out there talking. And some people are listening. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just trying to get even. She was trying to flip the narrative. Victimhood is a powerful disguise, especially when worn by someone with a history of authority. She was playing the long game now, salting the earth, planting doubt, hoping someone else would water it. So I decided to flip the script myself. The next day, I hosted a barbecue. It was petty, sure, but strategic. I cleaned my yard, dusted off the grill, hung some lights, and sent invites to every house on the block except Karen's. Even the teenagers who skate down the cul-de-sac came. Claudia brought margaritas. Someone brought cornhole. Tom showed up with bratwurst and a Bluetooth speaker. And for once, everyone just relaxed. No hovering authority. No rule enforcement. Just burgers and music and laughter. Around 8 p.m., as the sky shifted to that perfect golden-pink haze, Karen finally emerged. She stood in her driveway wearing a silk blouse and frowning hard enough to warp steel. She crossed her arms and stared at the party like she was trying to will it out of existence. Someone noticed. A neighbor whispered, "Is that her?" Another replied, "Yeah." "Don't make eye contact." I watched her watch us for a long minute. And then, just to twist the knife, I raised my beer in her direction and smiled. Not a smug smile. Just a calm, civil, "You're not in charge anymore" kind of smile. She turned and stormed back inside. After the party died down, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name typed in all cap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a fake HOA violation notice. It accused me of operating an unlicensed business and hosting unauthorized events exceeding noise thresholds. At the bottom, in red ink, someone had written, "You're no better than me." I laughed, folded it up, and slid it into my Karen file. Then I turned on my camera system, added another spotlight to the backyard, and installed a sensor near the garage. Because if she wanted to keep coming, I wasn't going anywhere. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Karen wasn't just planning one last jab. She was planning an ambush. And it would be very public, very loud, and very illegal. It happened on a Saturday, of course. That's when Karen always made her moves. Weekends, when people were home, when an audience could be guaranteed. I woke up to a text from Claudia, "You might want to look outside." That was never a good start to the day. I pulled the curtain aside and blinked twice to make sure I wasn't still dreaming. My driveway was barricaded with 4 folding chairs, 2 of them zip-tied together, all connected by a length of pink caution tape. In front of that, standing like she was guarding the gates of Valhalla, was Karen, hands on hips, sunglasses perched on her frizzy hair, and a clipboard in hand. Behind her, a homemade banner hung between 2 trees. It read, Community Safety Checkpoint, sponsored by concerned residents. I stared at her through the window for a good 20 seconds. She was blocking my driveway. Again. Except this time she'd escalated from passive-aggressive golf cart parking to full-blown delusional security theater. I stepped outside, keeping my voice calm. Karen, move the chairs. She flipped a page on her clipboard and pretended to check something. I'm sorry, but we're conducting a neighborhood-wide audit for safety violations. There have been reports of suspicious behavior and unauthorized activity on several properties. And this requires barricading my driveway? We've identified your residence as a high-risk zone. She actually used finger quotes. It's a precaution. Precaution against what, exactly? My overwatered tomatoes. She ignored the sarcasm and pointed to a printed map on her clipboard. I recognized it instantly. It was a blown-up satellite image of the neighborhood with my house circled in red ink. In the margin, someone had scrawled possible HOA rule breaker and underlined it 3 times. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was fascinated. This was no longer about power. Karen had slipped past petty and landed firmly in the realm of psychological warfare mixed with theater camp. I'm going to give you one warning, I said, voice still even. Move the chairs or I will. You touch this checkpoint, and I'll file for harassment. Great. I'll counter with trespassing and obstruction. That's when she made her mistake. She pulled out her phone and started live streaming. Everyone, this is what we're dealing with, she announced to an audience of exactly 0. This man has been threatening me for weeks. Now he's trying to dismantle a peaceful community watch station. I waved to the imaginary viewers and walked past her to untie the caution tape. She shrieked. Actually shrieked. Then, and I still can't believe this happened, she tossed her clipboard at my feet like a mic drop and sprinted to her yard. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Karen waved her arms as if flagging down a plane. Officer! Officer! That man assaulted my checkpoint. The cop, a tall woman with mirrored sunglasses and a face carved from stone, looked between us. Ma'am, what's a checkpoint? Karen launched into a breathless explanation about HOA threats, security audits, neighborhood terrorism. I waited patiently, arms crossed. The cop eventually turned to me and asked, Did you touch her or her property? Nope. I removed some lawn chairs from my own driveway. Did you threaten her? I told her I would move the chairs if she didn't. The officer looked over the scene, then back at Karen. Ma'am, this isn't a checkpoint. It's 4 chairs and some party tape. You're not allowed to block access to someone's property, and if you do it again, we'll be issuing a citation for obstruction. Karen sputtered. But I have documentation. I have maps. I'm sure you do, the officer said dryly. But unless those maps were drawn by the city zoning department, they don't mean a thing. The cruiser rolled away. Karen stood alone in the street, breathing like she'd just run a marathon, fists clenched. I smiled and went back inside, certain that would be the end of it. It wasn't. That night, while most of the neighborhood was winding down from yard work and errands, Karen launched the ambush. It started with a knock at my door. I opened it to find 2 men in polos and khakis, one holding a badge that looked just official enough to trick someone who didn't read. City inspection, he said. We've received an anonymous report about illegal building modifications and unapproved structures. Really? I said. At 7:15 on a Saturday? The second man nodded. We were in the area. Can we take a look around? No, but I can take a picture of your badges and call the city to verify. That changed their tone fast. We're just trying to ensure compliance. Great. Then you won't mind waiting while I call the city hotline. They left without another word. 2 minutes later, Claudia called again. She's live streaming again, she said. This time with a group. There are 5 people on her patio, and she's calling them the Maple Hollow Neighborhood Defense Committee. She says she's taking legal action against you for property terrorism. Is that even a thing? It is now. I walked outside and saw them, Karen and her hand-picked band of confused neighbors, some of whom clearly didn't know what they'd signed up for. They had signs. One read, "Don't let outsiders change our values." Another, "Rules protect everyone." The irony of Karen holding that one nearly made me laugh. Then came the drone. Yes, a drone. She'd somehow managed to get her nephew, or maybe her friend's nephew, to fly a camera drone over my backyard. I heard the buzzing before I saw it. It hovered like an angry hornet, circling my shed, zooming in on my flower bed. It dipped low enough to trip one of my motion lights. I grabbed my phone and called the police. This time they sent 2 officers. Karen put on her best wounded civil servant face. "This man is violating zoning codes. He's threatened me. He's building things without permit. We're simply documenting the evidence." The officer stared at the drone, then looked at Karen. "You're using a drone to surveil a private residence? For the community's safety. Ma'am, that's a violation of privacy laws. You need to ground it immediately." Karen turned to the kid flying it and hissed something. The drone dropped like a deflated balloon and skittered across her patio. I filed a formal complaint on the spot. So did Tom, who'd shown up mid-argument with his own camera rolling. The next day, Karen received an official cease and desist order regarding harassment and surveillance. And then, finally, something snapped. She stood on her porch as the officers drove away, breathing heavily, cheeks blotchy. She turned to her little defense committee and shouted, "You're all cowards! This neighborhood is falling apart and none of you care." Someone muttered, "We care. Just not like this." She looked around at her dwindling audience. Then at me. "You ruined everything. You ruined this place." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Everyone else could see the truth now. Karen wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was trying to possess it. And now she had nothing left. Or so I thought. Because that night she filed a lawsuit. A real one. Small claims court. Claiming damages to her reputation, emotional distress, and community destabilization. And I, being who I am, showed up with an entire binder titled Exhibit A, Karen's Greatest Hits. Because if she wanted a courtroom, she was going to get one. And it was going to be her biggest loss yet. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No towering oak benches or dramatic lighting, just folding chairs, a slightly crooked American flag, and a judge who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Karen, however, was dressed like she thought she was starring in a legal drama. A cream pantsuit, pearl earrings, hair sprayed into an immovable dome. She clutched a thick binder labeled Evidence in gold stickers, like she thought she was about to bring down a drug cartel instead of argue that a neighbor's barbecue had emotionally destabilized her. I was calm. Of course I was calm. That was the entire point. I walked in with a manila folder, a USB drive, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew that every accusation thrown my way had already boomeranged back toward its source. Tom came with me, along with Claudia, who insisted on testifying as a character witness. We didn't look like a defense team. We looked like we were here to renew a driver's license. But that was part of the strategy. Karen opened with a speech that would have made Shakespeare ask her to dial it back. She described her trauma, her ostracization, the hostile environment she claimed I created through targeted aggression and psychological manipulation. She even produced a printed screenshot of a meme someone had posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, a photoshopped image of a flamingo holding a no parking sign titled, "HOA Karen's Battle Flag." I hadn't made it, but she was convinced I was behind it. She claimed emotional damage, slander, harassment, and sabotage of her community's standing. The judge stopped her 5 minutes in. "Ma'am, this is small claims court. I need to see specific damages." Karen pointed at me like I'd keyed her car. "He incited the entire neighborhood against me. They hosted events without my approval. They disrespected the bylaws. And worst of all, he had my golf cart towed during a charity gathering." The judge blinked. Was the golf cart on his property? It was, partially adjacent to. Was it blocking his garage? She hesitated. That's not the point. That's exactly the point, the judge said. Do you have receipts for repairs? Hospital bills? Anything showing personal loss or monetary damage? Karen shuffled papers like she could conjure one into existence by force. I have screenshots, emails, testimonies. The judge turned to me. Sir. I stood and handed her my folder. Inside you'll find time-stamped images of the obstruction, a copy of the HOA bylaws that Karen herself signed, 3 city reports documenting her false complaints, video footage of her placing flamingos and blocking my driveway, and a written statement from the HOA vice president confirming her removal from office was due to repeated misconduct. I paused and placed the USB on her desk. Also, surveillance footage of Karen orchestrating a drone flyover of my property without permission, and audio of her referring to me as a psychological terrorist, while trying to recruit neighbors to fake code violations. Karen gasped like she'd just been stabbed in the soul. He's been spying on me. The judge raised an eyebrow. On his own property? He's manipulating the narrative. The judge nodded slowly, unimpressed. Ma'am, you are not the plaintiff in a conspiracy thriller. You're in small claims court trying to sue your neighbor for hosting a barbecue and enforcing parking rules. Karen clutched her binder tighter. This is injustice. No, the judge said, flipping through the folder. This is community drama, and it does not belong in my courtroom. I'm dismissing the case due to lack of evidence and abuse of process. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to remember how air worked. And one more thing, the judge added, pointing at me. If I were you, I'd consider filing a harassment restraining order. What I've seen here today crosses the line. Karen stormed out. Not a word. Just the high-pitched clack of her flats echoing down the hallway like the world's most irritating metronome. Outside the courthouse, Claudia lit a cigarette she hadn't had in years and muttered, "That felt like exorcising a demon." Tom chuckled. She thought she was the law. Turns out, she wasn't even above it. I thanked them both and drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But this time, I didn't assume it was over. I knew Karen better than that. She was a hydra. You chop off one head, 2 more show up wearing pearls and holding clipboards. So I stayed vigilant. But then something unexpected happened. Nothing. No more flamingos. No banners. No fake violations or driveway obstacles. Karen stayed in her house. Her porch light stayed off. For 3 weeks, she vanished into whatever emotional bunker she'd built around herself. Until the for sale sign appeared. It was a Tuesday morning. I walked out to get the mail and saw it planted in her lawn like a surrender flag. By owner, serious inquiries only. No realtor. No open house signs. Just a phone number taped to a yard stake and a van in the driveway packed with boxes. I stared at it for a full minute, then went inside and made a cup of coffee that tasted a little sweeter than usual. Word traveled fast. Claudia called me within the hour. She's leaving. She's selling? No, she's fleeing. Someone said she already rented a condo in the next town over. She's not even waiting for the place to sell. Tom called next. Board got word. She's officially resigning from the HOA entirely. No more appeals. No more committees. She's done. That Friday, I stood at my window and watched her load the last of her things into the van. She moved slowly, her shoulders slumped. She wasn't ranting or grandstanding. Just quietly leaving. No parade. No tantrum. Just silence. She didn't look up at my house once. But I watched until she pulled out of the driveway and turned the corner. And then, for the first time since I moved to Maple Hollow, I opened the garage door without having to step over a golf cart, a flamingo, or a fake citation. It was almost surreal. Like a war zone turning into a picnic spot overnight. That weekend, I hosted another barbecue. Claudia brought potato salad. Greg brought ribs. Tom made margaritas and suggested we form a rotating neighborhood watch, just in case someone else ever tried to stage a checkpoint. Everyone laughed. They asked me to run for HOA chair. I declined. I'd already won the real victory. Not control. Not revenge. Peace. And my damn driveway back.